Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good evening
So,
to all our viewers in Malaysia, and good morning to Kathleen in Buffalo, New York. And tonight, welcome. I want to welcome all of you to our webinar organized by the Hashim Thani Center for Palestine Studies on the topic of talking about Palestine in America. We all know that America is the most influential country in the world. Economists say that when America's economy sneezes, the world will catch a cold. So that is how economists see the role of America in the world. Well, America is certainly the most influential power in the Middle East, on the world, of course, and the most influential on the Palestine issue. Many are saying that if the US stops the supply of weapons to Israel, the genocide in Gaza will stop tomorrow. Well, but unfortunately, America is currently the strongest supporter of Israel, and by implication, is the strongest supporter of the genocide in Gaza. The latest example of America's stance was last Tuesday when the UNGA, or United Nations General Assembly, adopted a resolution affirming the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, and it was supported by an overwhelming majority of 172 countries. And only 7 countries oppose it. Who are the 7? Israel, United States, Micronesia, Argentina, Paraguay, and Papua New Guinea. And well, besides Israel, the others are, well, I would say, not very influential at all. So United States is the one again. And because of United States, 172 countries wish have to be pushed aside. But we all know anyway that the UNGA cannot enforce the resolution because you need the backing of the United Nations Security Council. But again, it will be a waste of time to ask the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, to debate and decide on the issue, because we all know the US will veto any resolution that is not in line with Israel's interests. So in the end, we need the US to change its stance regarding Palestine before we can hope to see justice, freedom, and equality in Palestine. So that is why it is important for ordinary Americans to be aware of the injustice that is happening in Palestine now. I happen to study in the States, in Buffalo, basically, and in 1980s, 1985 to 1987, and during my time, at that time, my impression was almost all Americans were unaware of the situation in Palestine. But now, many are very, very aware. Not only do they know about the issue of Palestine, they know the geographical locations of cities or towns in Gaza, they know the names of the victims. So they are very aware. But there are still huge challenges faced in America because the Zionist lobby is spending billions to ensure that America will always continue to support Israel. So tonight's webinar is to discuss these challenges, and we are lucky to have with us 4 individuals from diverse background, but with the common thing between them is that they are all my friends. And they will share their perspectives and experiences when talking about Palestine in America. So they are Azhar Stevens, Professor Nick Rushdi, Nick Hassan, Dr. Kathleen Sears, and Ms. Safia Topiwala. I will introduce, first, welcome all of you to our webinar, and thank you very much for your kind agreement to participate in this webinar. And now I'm going to introduce all the panelists, beginning with Azhar. Azhar Stevens received a BSc in Electrical Engineering from University of Maryland, an MBA from UCLA, and a postgraduate diploma in Islamic Banking and Finance from International Islamic University in Malaysia. He worked as an avionics engineer in the US before moving to Asia 35 years ago, long time ago. He was living in China, Singapore, and Malaysia, where he was in marketing and finance. He was also involved in Viva Palestina Malaysia, BDS Malaysia, and also some Muslim organization where he took the Shahada in 1993, and he has a background in Islamic banking, consumer issues, permaculture, and travel. Our second panelist is Professor Nick Rini Hassan, who is a professor of Management, Information Systems, MIS, and Business Analytics at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. How do you, I hope I spell it properly or pronounce it properly, Duluth, USA. He obtained his PhD in Information Systems and Information Technology from the University of North Texas. He has decades of experience in the IT and IS sector, having worked both in Malaysia and in America. In 2002, he moved to the US to begin his academic career at the University of Minnesota, Duluth, and has been there until now. He is a very active researcher in the field of IT and IS and has published extensively in the area. Dr. Kathleen Sears is a broadly trained human geographer and works as a National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Geography at Indiana University, Bloomington. She obtained her PhD from the University of Buffalo in the field of economic geography. Her critical research sits at the nexus of economic and development geography and centers on understanding South-South development, cooperation, and trade. Also, the role of firm, states, and ecological dimension of supply chains as they relate to regulation and development, and also on challenges associated with missing, incomplete, unreliable data and the politics of knowledge. Her most recent research examines the global pesticide complex and shifting nodes of production of pesticides, specifically to the Southeast Asian region and Malaysia in particular. I found out from Kathleen Sears that Malaysia is a very major exporter of pesticides in the world. Interesting. But that will be discussed in another webinar, inshallah, and its implication for environment, etc. Our last panelist is Safia Topiwala, who is a recent graduate of Princeton University in molecular biology with a minor in global health and health policy. She has worked as emergency medical technician since June 2019 and has been involved in medical research programs. She was also active in students' activism and is currently the president of Muslim Advocates for Social Justice, Princeton in New Jersey. She is also currently a Fulbright scholar in Malaysia and is engaged in a research project here. She was heavily involved with Princeton University's SJP, which stands for Students for Justice in Palestine, the chapter at Princeton, and was a key organizer of the students' encampment. She is currently one of the key participants of the weekly Jalan Palestine rallies, which are being organized by BDS Malaysia. All right, those are our panelists, very interesting people. And I'm gonna ask this question to all the panelists, and I hope to get response from the first one will be Azhar, and after that Nick, and then Caitlin, and Safia. So the question is, why do you think Americans were very unaware of the issue of Palestine prior to October 7? And what about you? How did you learn about the issue of Palestine? Go ahead, Azhar. Hey, Azhar, we have lost Azhar. For some reason, we have lost Azhar. So can I invite Nick, Professor Nick?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So, I'm not as experienced and knowledgeable of the politics and the of the whole issue compared to my fellow panelists. But what I'm going to tell the story of is basically what we did in Duluth, a small town, I guess. Well, in North Minnesota, when right after October 7 happened. By the way, Prof, how many minutes do I have? Just to make sure I'm not running over. I think you're muted.
Can go 5 minutes first.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, I'll
For
make it quick then.
fiction, yeah.
Okay, so what happened was after October 7th, we have very good relationships with the local faith groups in Duluth, including the Temple of Israel, which is one of the larger temples in Duluth, and other Christian churches there. And so after October 7th, we actually approached them and asked them if they would like to help clear out the graffiti that somebody painted on our mosque wall in
Oh,
Duluth. So, and they agreed. They, you know, it was just a few days after October 7th. People were still reeling from that experience, especially in America. And we thought it was a good gesture to do that. Many of the other churches lauded our efforts to kind of approach the temple. And I have friends in the temple as well. Um, friends that we actually have programs together in Duluth. Anyway, so after that successful event, even the Catholic Church in Duluth sent me a personal letter from the, the hierarchy there saying, "Oh, we were so pleased you did that." And then what happened was when they retaliated, when the Israeli government retaliated, as we know what happened, we kind of, we decided that we should raise funds to help the people in Gaza. In fact, we were probably one of the earliest in the community as far as we know, because it was like probably just a few weeks after that. And we approached about a few churches. By that time, there was already a split happening in the Temple of Israel. The temple itself, there were a few people who were, of course, against what the Israeli government is doing. So, and those who were against mostly were friends of mine. And then there were also the leader there who visits Israel often. And of course, he is pro government. And so there was this split among them as well. But a few weeks after that, we organized a fundraiser. And we were expecting, maybe 100 people will come. We'll be happy we can raise $5,000. We had in that fundraiser, it was just hosted by the First Lutheran Church in Duluth, one of the largest churches in Duluth, who helped us out. There were like 9 churches who were with us, who wanted to raise funds to help. And we also had a few of the people who are associated with the temple and the Jews in Duluth who were not associated as well, who were against what was happening in Israel. And we wanted people to know what happened, the history, the Nakba and everything, wanted people to know about that. So we did a video show, we did everything, a poster show and so on. And more than 400 people in northern Minnesota, mind you. This is not the Twin Cities area. This is not a city in the sense of a city in the US. So more than 400 people attended. It was full house. We invited a representative from from the Islamic organizations there, and she came and gave a wonderful speech. We raised more than $60,000. We were expecting to raise 5, but we raised $60,000.
Subhanallah.
We didn't even know where 60K. That
Wow.
was like, one of the first fundraisers. I believe one of the first fundraisers, probably in that region for sure. Maybe it was like just a month after, and people didn't know what was happening. So when we had the poster show, people were surprised, genuinely surprised, and they gave a standing ovation to the young lady who spoke from Palestine. So I guess what I'm trying to say in the 5 minutes I have is that there is this huge propaganda that is unfortunately quite successful in suppressing information. Now, just like other cities, we also have people protesting. Every weekend we would protest in Duluth near the main roads there and everything. And in general, people just are not familiar with what's going on. And
Okay.
they don't watch, the same news we watch. Um, but in the end, I think the issue is really what God essentially told us already, that it is each individual that is responsible for themselves, and the conscience that's given to us. They're going to be asked about that. Um, but about the question of how we're going to, do something more than that, more than maybe raising funds or, raising the consciousness of what's happening in Gaza, I don't have a good answer. All I
Okay, we will
know is,
discuss.
yeah,
We'll discuss that later. We will
yeah,
discuss that.
exactly. So
The
that's
start.
that's my first-hand
Yeah.
experience of what we did.
Okay, thank you. It's about how ignorant or how unaware Americans were prior
Right.
to October 7. And you think it was basically due to American news media propaganda which suppressed the situation in Palestine?
Right.
Okay, Azhar, we lost you just now. I've got you back again, Azhar. Okay, your microphone, please. Microphone, unmute your microphone, please. Can't hear you, Azhar. I'm sorry, I can't. We can't hear you for some reason. Uh, yeah, we are not having your. We are not able to hear you. Just now we was loud and clear. Not sure why. Can you say again? Uh-oh. Tell you what, Azhar, can you come in again? And then we ask somebody else to go first, and then you come in again, and we listen to you. Okay, let's go. We can't hear anything, so let's go to Caitlin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, loud and
Okay,
clear.
awesome. Okay, so I came to know about the issue of Palestine probably about 10 years ago when I was in my master's program at University at Buffalo. And it was actually through a friend that I had interacted with in the Department of Geography. He's Jewish, and he felt very strongly about the issue, because he has his heritage. And so he felt very strongly connected to the land in that area, and the stories that were told by his family and the displacement of the Jewish people. So unfortunately, I got a very biased view of the situation from the onset, and I felt like there was something else that wasn't being told, right? I knew there were other people that were living on this land. I knew about Palestine. I was a geography major, so I knew about these countries. I knew the locations, but I wasn't getting that side of the story, and I felt that was really concerning. And so I actually, for a while, I didn't do any research. I didn't look further into the issue. I think, like a lot of people do, especially in the United States, if you don't have the news and the media feeding you the information or telling you this is a problem, or the United States is involved in this war, this proxy war, this issue, you kind of put it outside of your purview. You're not really thinking about it. And so I think up until October 7th, unfortunately, of last year, that's when I really started to pay attention, because now the news is telling me, this is becoming a bigger issue. And I also think, like the previous panelist had mentioned, I think media plays a huge role here. People like to think that the United States, we have a lot of free speech. The media presents all sorts of views. It's kind of unbiased, but that's not the case here, right? The media is owned by a couple, maybe two very big influential companies that are bought out by capitalists. And so what we're seeing on the news is very much the story of the Israeli government and what they want to control and what they think should happen in Palestine, and how they view the Palestinian people and how they view Hamas and what they think Hamas is. So I think there's a lot of fundamental misunderstanding about, and to be honest, I don't know the full story. I tried to do a lot of reading. I recently was trying to read 100 Years War by Rashid Khalidi, just to get a better, grounding in this history and really understand what's happening. And I think a lot of people in the United States see it as an issue that doesn't directly affect them, so they don't seek out the information. And that's, to me, the sad reality of what's happening. But I think since October 7th, since we see a lot of younger people on college campuses, a lot of organizing, and I've been involved in that in Indiana University. And there's also a really great kind of mini conference happening at University of Kentucky on Palestine. I think now we're seeing more mobilization of young, educated people that are pushing for these narratives to be told and pushing for a more balanced narrative, right? And more of the information to come out. And I think that's why you see there are a lot more people that are aware of the situation, and they're a lot more aware of what's happening. And they're also starting to question, because they're seeing that there's not just one side. And how can you argue when you are scrolling through? I think social media is a big contributor to this too, in a positive light. When you're scrolling through your social media and you're seeing photos of the devastation in Gaza, you're seeing children, you're seeing nurses, you're seeing journalists, how you can't ignore that, right? It is becoming harder and harder to ignore it and not question, well, why is that happening? Or why are they blowing up schools? Why are they targeting hospitals? And so in some ways, I think the social media campaigns that are out there, done a lot by young people, are really helping to shed light on the issue, and bringing it to the forefront. And I notice it has died down a little bit in the United States, right? There's not as much push. I think, it's been over a year that this is happening. And so I think people are, in some ways, losing their stamina to fight for this cause, unfortunately. But then I'm constantly still seeing it, so there are people that, like in Buffalo, actually, my previous advisor is involved in Jewish Voice for Peace, and they've partnered with the Islamic Society, and they're constantly putting out statements for a ceasefire, for stopping the arms trade to Israel, so then this atrocity can stop. But yeah, I think media has played a huge role, negatively and positively. And I just look forward to learning more from the panelists here, and trying to talk more about the issues and come up with strategies of how do we move forward and how can we really make an impact on this. Oh, you're still muted.
Thank you, Caitlin. So thank you. So now can we bring in Safia? Are you there, Safia?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you for both the introduction and for the other panelists to speak on this question so far. I think it's really interesting being able to hear from sort of the professor's perspective and also from Dr. Sears' perspective so far, because my sort of view of this is very student-centered, and has been primarily just as the issue exists on a college campus for the last year. I think to your question about why, or what are Americans' views on it, or how did they come to know about this issue? I think America, the biggest thing that I've learned over the past year in relation to this is that it's an incredibly individualistic society. And I think the other panelists also touched on this a little bit, especially what Dr. Hussein was saying. Yeah, if it doesn't affect them, right? If it's not something that directly affects you, then you don't care about it, because it's not something that affects your day-to-day. It's not something that you have to think about. So a lot of people just don't. And I think, yes, social media is making it increasingly harder for people to ignore that. But I still think that it's like very difficult as the time goes on for people to be able to make people care about something that they have not chosen to care about for the past year, especially with all these images and all the devastation that they're seeing. In terms of the college campus, so on Princeton's campus, when things initially happened on October 7th, there was definitely a lot of campus conversation. There was definitely a lot of initial sort of strife between the Center for Jewish Life, Tigers for Israel, just different sort of college campus groups that were very pro-Israel. And then the Students for Justice in Palestine, the Muslim Students Association, everyone was putting out statements. Everyone was trying to get ahead of it. There was a lot of conversation. And since then, it's been, yes, we had the encampments that happened in April and May, and that definitely caused a lot of people to come out, both in support and against it, and that kind of revitalized the conversation. But I think since then, yes, things have like quote unquote died down on the outside, I suppose, from a media perspective. But internally, there's definitely still things that are happening on each campus. The biggest thing with this fight is that it's a slow and gradual thing. And to be able to make any sort of change in America, it needs to be something that is a long, drawn out fight. Like, things are not going to change tomorrow. And so initially, when the encampment started spreading up across America, the biggest sort of demand that we all had as students was we wanted divestment from these institutions that hold so much purchasing power and are donating an exorbitant amount of money to weapons manufacturers that are contributing directly to Israel. And so we were all demanding divestment. And I think the biggest thing that we had to learn as student activists was that can't happen tomorrow. It needs to be something that's consistent and persistent, and you need to keep pushing at administration. You need to keep pushing at people. So since April, there have been various motions to garner campus support, and various referendums that have been passed, and things that the SJP chapter is trying to push out to like really try to raise awareness from a campus public perspective, so that that pressure can start being put on administration. Because until and unless like the admin realizes that the majority of the students want this, nothing's going to change. And so it's not necessarily about, you know, like a few handful of us that are very active and vocal. We are realizing that we need to start really trying to get the majority on our side. And I think the biggest thing with that is exactly like trying to spread awareness, trying to keep doing things, even if they are small, but persistently, so that things start to like overall momentum starts to change. And I think overall, yes, definitely people are more aware since a year ago. But of course, a lot of work still needs to be done with that, and for people to like understand the information.
All right. Safia, just curiosity, are you listed in the Canary Mission list or not? Your name is in there?
I was not last time I checked, and I'm like, you know what, I don't want to check. So as of months ago, I wasn't.
Okay. All right. It's okay. All right. Thank you, Safia. Can we have Azhar now, please? Azhar, are you with us?
Okay, hopefully I'm over the technical difficulties.
Yes, I can hear you now. Great. Go ahead.
But unfortunately, I missed your question. So
okay, a question is basically 1980s, 1990s. Actually, before October 7, strangely, hardly anybody knew about Americans, as far as my perception anyway. Americans didn't know what was happening in Palestine, despite decades of oppression and killings and ethnic cleansing. But Americans didn't know about it. Why? And what about yourself? Why America didn't know about it, and why do you think is the main reason? And then your own case.
Okay, I think the main reason is the narrative that we're fed, the media that we get. It hides it all. It doesn't tell us the story. So I mean I grew up there, and I even grew up one block away from the head of AIPAC in the 70s, and actually. I knew he was a neighbor. I knew he was Jewish, but I didn't know that it was head of AIPAC. I didn't know anything about AIPAC at the time, and I was even in the Washington D.C. area. So we weren't brought up with the awareness, and the narrative was flipped upside down. So all we were told was that, you know, the Palestinians are bad and they're terrorists, and the Israelis are good, and we have to support them. So all that narrative was supporting that. We didn't really get good understanding. I didn't really start to understand it until I left the U.S., and then I got a much broader perspective. much broader coverage of media. Everything really opened up, and I could see a lot more. Fortunately, in the last year, or unfortunately because of a terrible situation, but with the since October 7th, the social media, that's opened everything up, and I think a lot more people are learning about it now. They know a lot more now. It still isn't talked about so commonly. Like, I was just back there, and it's not really, you can't bring it up all the time, and it's not the hottest topic with everyone. But I think the awareness has gone from very little and upside down to much more now, and people are starting to hear the truth. So that's what I've seen.
Okay, yeah, just follow through with this question, and then I hope the other panelists can also come in afterward, which is your experience when you talk with friends, when you were over there recently to other Americans when you were there. What was their reaction? Were they hostile? Were they open? Were they open to listen to the truth, or what?
Fortunately, not really hostile, but it's a little bit of a sensitive topic with many people. So it's kind of like talking about religion or your salary or stuff like that. It's not always very comfortable to talk about, but definitely more awareness, and you could talk about it more now, and they're more willing to listen, definitely, and could get more dialogue across. But even, like, for example, I visited a masjid in was it actually in Virginia, southwestern Virginia, Harrisonburg, and I talked to the imam there, and basically he said that, oh, this is a problem the Middle East has to take care of. The Middle Eastern neighbors need to take care of it. So I was kind of surprised that he wasn't even. He was like, it's not our problem here, all way over in the U.S. far away. It's really their problem over there. And he's even from that imam is even from Pakistan, so he's not even a local born.
Oh.
So I found that kind of strange. But speaking to other masjid members, they said basically we all support Palestine, and we donate money. So there's donations to the cause. But yeah, it's a bit of a sensitive topic, but more and more you can talk about it now.
Okay, can I bring Nick in? Your experience talking to American Jews. Just now you mentioned that you spoke to people from Temple, and they were open. And you managed to raise 60K. But what about other Americans? Is it the same kind of very open and very willing to listen, or is there any hostility from some Americans? Can you share your experience?
I would agree with Azhar just now that this is a sensitive matter for some Americans. And the reason, I mean, we know, for example, what happened to MIT's and Harvard's presidents, leadership who were asked to resign, right? So it's not a small matter. I mean, they've contributed so much to the university, and they have to quit. I mean, what the heck? So my colleague, my own department, for example, he would whisper to me. He says, "Yeah, I know, I'm with you with this, but I can't speak up, about it. Even though I have I have posters on my office walls to donate and to, about what's going on. So it is definitely a sensitive issue because of the power and influence of the Jewish lobby here in America. But let me just say a few things, my observations about this. Number one is I've spoken to a few of the from the temple, and I'd like to convey my understanding of what they think about it, especially those who are in support of Israel. A few that I met, they are genuinely terrified for themselves. I mean, they're afraid of dying. They're afraid of being eliminated from the surface of the earth, kind of thing. So they are. And again, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in the Quran, about how they are afraid. They're not, because they only care for this world. And it's true. They have lost the deen and that was given to them, right? Because they were supposed to be the leaders, the people who were supposed to bring the light to the world, right? But they have lost that. and replaced it with a worldly religion, a worldly Jewish religion. So, and that's reflected now in their reaction to what's happening. So I guess that's number one. The fact that they are generally afraid. Number two, I have a problem with how we react, and I think we can compare this what's happening in Syria right now. Okay, we have a principle in Islam, and the principle says that the ends does not justify the means. And whatever we do, we are not supposed to go down to the level that other people have put themselves just because we want to win or we want to, I don't know, dominate, whatever we want to say it. And I've seen people who protest, in ways that are not necessarily the nice way to do it. I mean, think about what happened when certain Muslims, and we have to admit this, we have to own up to our own mistakes, right? When we kill people, when we capture a whole dormitory of, those are means that does not justify, it's not justified, right? The goals does not do that. So I've seen that in some of the movements, and I don't think that's helpful. Now, if you compare that to what's happening in Syria right now, I think the Prophet has taught us that we should be able to manage the message. The message that's given from us that we send out is as important as the deen, right? So the Prophet taught us that, and I think that's a good lesson. I think God is teaching us all this through what's happening in Gaza, and just my thoughts about that.
Thank you, Nick. Caitlin, you said just now you have friends in the Jewish Voice for Peace, but there are other American friends and relatives. How do you discuss with them about this topic? Nick said it's a very sensitive topic. So how do you approach when you talk to them? How do they respond, and how do you manage their response on that?
Yeah, I think it is a very sensitive topic, and I typically am conversing with people who are also in academia, and I'm really lucky that a lot of them are very pro-Palestine, very much like ceasefire. And so the conversations that happen in the Department of Geography at Indiana University look very different from the conversations I have with my friends from high school who work corporate jobs and, just chose a different path from me. They're not engaged in this type of like intellectual inquiry and deep reading and deep learning and things like that. So the one beautiful thing to see was in the Department of Geography, all of the faculty were very much interested in having meetings about how to support the student movements, and everyone was on board, all 12 or 13 of them. So those conversations are very easy to have because people are on the same page. When I talk to some of my friends from high school, it's not, we're friends, so that makes it a little bit easier. It's not as sensitive, and my friends know me as someone who will push them on these types of issues, but they are very much drawn to the narratives that they see on CNN or, very much, if I said something about the genocide, they said, well, is it, but I read this article from CNN that said it's not really classified as a genocide, or what about Israel's stance? They always wanted to push back and give me some kind of media headline to justify the fact that they thought, well, it's a very complex issue. That's what a lot of people say. It's very complex, and a lot of people don't understand it, and so we can't pick sides. That's the narrative that I hear a lot, is that they try to obscure the facts by saying that it's so complicated because there's this long history. There's, they bring up religion and they say, because this is fundamentally a religious issue, well, we can't understand it because, we're not Jewish or we're not Muslim. And I think that's their way of saying they haven't done their research and they don't want to, and they're just going to go with the mainstream kind of what most people think of is the narrative, right? They don't want they don't want to read the articles, or they don't want to be exposed to the uncomfortable information, because it is uncomfortable. It is really difficult to sit there and say, hey, our tax dollars are going towards this atrocity that's happening in Palestine right now. And you also feel very hopeless. So I think, and generally my friends are receptive, they'll listen to me, but it's very difficult to actually change people's minds. Once they have it in their head that Israel has a right to defend itself, that's a big thing that people say too. You know, Israel should defend itself, just like Palestine should defend itself. I don't think they understand the unevenness in that statement and how that can't be true. So I think there are some quote unquote well-meaning people who want to engage in discussion, like my friends, you know, but ultimately they still will be drawn into the media narratives and drawn into what the United States as the government, you know, as a political entity has to say, and what those interests are and where those interests lie.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. So I never knew that the geography department is very open to to finding the truth about things. I studied MBA and I work in a business school, and I know that in business schools in the US it will be very different, very corporate finance kind of background. They will have a very different way, and probably very different when you talk to people from medical school. I think the medical school will be very horrified what's happening in Palestine, in Gaza, genocide. They look at, so it would be interesting to do a study to look at the compare between departments or faculty and schools, right? See how they respond to this issue and how they perceive the issue.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, geography being a social science, the social sciences tend to be more critical and more investigative, right? They will analyze the situation a bit more, and I think that helps with them having a more understanding view, and they're really interested in supporting the cause. So, but yeah, and actually in Indiana, the Kelly Business School, it's very well known in the United States. You don't, I mean, this is just anecdotally, I haven't talked to a lot of people there, but you don't see a lot of those students getting involved in the movement. You can see the students that are involved in the encampments were from anthropology, or we had medical students, you know, or geography, or different, you know, more of the social sciences or English majors or things like that. So yeah, a study on that would be very interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, Safia, can you come in and give some comments on this and how you, how you spoke to your, I think your circle of friends? Do they include people who are different from you in terms of their perception of Palestine? And how do you cope when talking to them? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna respond really quick to something that you were just talking about with Caitlin that I just think is interesting. So at Princeton, they started a Faculty for Justice in Palestine chapter of like faculty members and staff who wanted to, like professors who wanted to support the students who were involved in the encampments and negotiation with the admin. And it was really funny because, well, funny is maybe not the best word, but yeah, most of the FJP, the faculty, are humanities professors, are African American studies, anthropology, history, English, and by and large humanities. And so we would often joke as students, like they're the ones that have humanity or can at least see it, because it was quite difficult to get any of the engineering or natural science or any of the other faculty kind of on board or even sign any petitions. So yeah, it's definitely certainly a trend across America, I would say. In terms of the conversations I've had, there's definitely different groups of people that I think I've interacted with up until this point. There's the people that are hands down going to say, yes, it's like too complicated an issue, it's too complex, I don't understand the history of it, there's a lot going on there. And then there's a lot of people that will sort of go back to saying how religion just breeds evil and how it leads to all this conflict and war, and how it's like never a recipe for anything good, because they'll be like, you see like it's the Jews and the Muslims that are like fighting over this and have been for centuries, and that's what's led to this point, and it's led to all this death and destruction. And so they'll like acknowledge that there is a lot of devastation, but there won't be sort of that like, okay, let's take a step back and maybe critically think about the situation, and exactly like look past the headlines a little bit and kind of see what's at play instead of just, you know, feeding into the propaganda. There's also, I think, just being at a university, there's a huge percentage, a lot of my friends and a lot of other people who are supportive of the cause, but they don't want to say anything because it's such a huge issue now to be doxxed and to sort of be blacklisted, to be taken, like for your opportunities to be taken away, especially at, I think, some of these elite institutions in America. There's such a huge like drive to for everyone, you know, what are you doing post grad? Like you're going into grad schools, you're going into medical schools, law schools, you want to get that job at Goldman Sachs, you want to go into the corporate world like this, you want to go into consulting, right? That's like the biggest sort of drive for all these students, and the sort of narrative that's been pushed down. Like it's just something that has been true for decades now. And these are the companies that will cherry pick students from these schools. And so no one wants to sort of sabotage those opportunities for themselves. And a lot of students do come from sort of like first gen low income backgrounds. And so a lot of students are worried about their scholarships or financial aid being taken away if they ever got suspended, if they ever got caught in disciplinary action. And so there's all of these sorts of things that at least students are juggling and thinking about. And so even though there were totally, definitely a lot of people who were supportive or who were willing to sort of look past the propaganda and were really unlearning some of that, you know, some of the media that they've been taught for years, and that they've seen, and were starting to open their eyes. It's very difficult to take people from that step to going and galvanizing them to action, because people are, and rightfully so, afraid of having, you know, essentially their futures taken away from them. And so a lot of people didn't want to come out and protest, or at least like didn't want to put their name on a petition. Maybe they would come out and wear a mask, but they wouldn't ever get involved in any sort of public way. And so, yeah, I would say that was I think that's a huge population in America.
Okay, Xavier, stay there. Now the genocide in Gaza is ongoing, 45,000 now. Also, ethnic cleansing in West Bank. In other words, the killings continue. 40 deaths, 40 Palestinians being killed every day is now just normal news now. So it is urgency to stop it. And we discussed just now that you can have anything that happens in other countries. In Malaysia, if 100% everybody supports Palestine, want to do something, nothing's going to happen, because Malaysia is very uninfluential when it comes to Middle East and Palestine. Indonesia, even if hundreds of millions of the population in Indonesia, if all of them are supportive of Palestine, nothing's going to happen too. At the end of the day, it's still America. It's still America. So what needs to happen in America for it to change this policy? How do you see the process? Can you give us some ideas to hope for the process of change, where eventually America will change its stance, and then the weapons from America will stop going to Palestine? Can you envision for us this optimistic future?
The $1 million question, right? It's been something that, you know, I'm still involved with the campus conversations and what's happening on campus. And this is the biggest thing that a lot of activists are sort of dealing with, this like burnout of, you know, people have been kind of pushing at it for the last year, and people are trying to get hopeless because exactly, things are just getting worse on the news. And I think for a lot of students, it's like, how can we start to change these systems that exist in America? I think the biggest thing that we've sort of been talking about as a community is to not stop talking about it. We need to keep having conversations about it, and beyond conversations, there needs to be action. And even if that action is, maybe you're disrupting some sort of college event, maybe you're disrupting a town hall, maybe you're protesting in front of the administration's board of trustees meetings, whatever it may be, even if it's a small group of people, to consistently keep doing it so that other people keep seeing, because I think by and large that has led to overall changing the tide on campus, like I was saying earlier. For sure, a lot more people know about the issue since October 7th. And it's when that starts happening, when enough students and the majority starts weighing in and being like, you know what, no, we do care, then that's when these things start to change. At least, for instance, example, in the 90s, they sort of led this divestment push at that time for apartheid in South Africa, and to stop having the same thing, to demand divestment from companies that were allowing apartheid to persist in South Africa. And so in the beginning, the same sort of issues, no one cared on campus. No one thought it was an issue that affected them because it was something that was thousands of miles away. And so they actually had an encampment at that time, and they sort of started to get campus conversations, the newspaper, things like that, talking about it. And it was a process. It took a few years, but they finally got enough of the majority support to be able to sort of start making some change. And I think that is an example that a lot of people are looking to for hope, of just thinking about okay, things like this have happened in the past, crises have happened in the past. And there has been success that has come out of it. It just has to do with dedication and persistence, and you have to trust in Allah's plan, I think, also in the sense that there is some meaning that maybe you cannot see in the moment, but there is something that, is to come out of his plan. And so you have to just keep pushing and keep doing the best that you can.
Thank you, Safia. Azhar, any comment?
Well, I think I totally agree. I think everybody has to do their part. You just have to keep having a conversation with whoever you can and keep it alive as much as possible. I have a lot of hope also with the students, because I remember I grew up during the Vietnam War time in the U.S. and apartheid, and it seemed like it was never going to change. Just like the Berlin Wall, you didn't expect to go down. And the students, the campus has made a big difference. But of course, I was very disappointed seeing what they've tried to shut down the students this time. In fact, and one of the universities I went to was UCLA, and if you saw what happened at UCLA, it was terrible. They let the mobs just crush the students, and then they wouldn't let them speak up. It was terrible. So that's a bit disappointing, but I still think the students have a lot to do. They're our hope. They're the future. They're the idealists. They can speak up, and I saw them make the change of the Vietnam War and even apartheid also. Other things we can do, like one thing I did, because you have to think of ideas, what you can do. One of the big financial podcasts from in the U.S. Actually, they're in Northern Virginia, and the guy is a very, very good guy, and actually it's two brothers that own it, and he'd actually made a visit to Palestine, so he had experience, and he was trying to see both sides, and he brought it up in one of the podcasts, and he got the strong Israeli response there, and so I actually wrote in, and he actually read read the Israeli response to that original response, and then my response is the Palestinian response, and he's pretty level-headed and wanted to kind of see both sides, but then again, he's from Washington D.C. and he has lots of Jewish friends that he's grown up his whole life, but he's been to Palestine, so he's kind of like he's doing something and he's kind of getting there, but he can't quite cut that. His whole life he's been told that narrative, and he's got the Jewish friends, but if only he could see it's not a problem with Jewish and Zionism are two different things. You know, you can still have your Jewish friends, but you can speak out vociferously against Zionism and what is happening there, like Miko Peled, who you know, and he now is open at the Palestine House. When I was back there, I went to the Palestine House. It's just a few minute walk from Capitol Hill. And so, but unfortunately, he wasn't there at the time, but he's got the Palestine House, so he's trying to do something. But then you walk up to Capitol Hill and then down the towards the Washington Monument, and there's that big trailer box there that says "Let free the hostages." And I just asked myself, can you imagine if someone with the Palestinian cause could just plop a box there in the middle of the mall there in Washington D.C.? But these Zionists, the Israelis, could put that box down that says "Free the hostages" and tell their side, but not the Palestinians tell our side. So I think there's a lot we can all do our part. We just have to keep looking for things to do, and I hope that the students something will keep catalyzing them, and they'll keep coming alive. Yeah.
Thank you, Azhar. Caitlin, your comments on how we want to be optimistic that things are going to change, and what is that process? Can you describe to us?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Safia. I think it's a really difficult question to answer because a lot of people have lost hope. And honestly, coming to Malaysia, you know, I was there a couple weeks ago and having conversations with you as well as other people there. I think a lot of people have hope, and they're very hopeful that this situation will turn around eventually. And I think a lot of it comes from your beliefs and your religious system, which I think is beautiful. I do think this is very much a student-led movement, and the students will continue to be at the forefront of making change. I think that we also need to take seriously in America our right, our duty to vote our political leaders into office. I think there has been, and I don't want to talk about our president-elect, but I think that there has been this feeling of I can't do anything as one person. And to an extent, that's true. But I think voting is the singular act that we have autonomy, we have power over to incite change. And I think there are a lot of young people who are interested in being in political positions that have not been bought out by, you know, big money and corporations, have not, you know, been through the political system and the corruption that exists, who are serious about changing the country and changing the systems. I think the younger generation, the students, are very resilient. Like Safia said, you know, from what I've seen, things have died down, at least on the Indiana University campus. The University at Buffalo campus was shut down very quickly. Their encampments, you know, and to no avail. There was really not another set of students who tried to push forward. But like Safia said, you know, they're still organizing. There's still organizing that's happening. There's still disruption that's happening. And I think these constant disruptions lead to so many inconveniences that politicians and arms manufacturers and people who are very pro-Israel have to listen. They have to start listening, right? And it is a long process. It's not going to happen, you know, at the end of 2024. It might not happen at the end of 2025. But I think these small incremental changes, continuing to organize, another thing that's already been said, so I'm just reiterating, but I think continuing to have the uncomfortable conversations with people who, you know, have different views in an effort to educate, in an effort to change their perspectives. And maybe that doesn't happen right away, but maybe they read something and they say, oh, I never thought about that. You know, I didn't think about it that way. I didn't think about the other perspective. I think that's very powerful when you can have conversations that are friendly, that are engaging. They're not combative. I think we have a tendency here to, you know, I think our differences get weaponized against us, but I think we ultimately want the same thing, right? I think when you get down to it, a lot of Americans would agree if we understood what was actually happening. So I think trying to break through those differences that are being weaponized against us can be really powerful as well. And then just one last thing, in terms of education, criticizing the choices and the Israeli government is not anti-Semitic, right? I think we need to keep pushing that, because now everything's anti-Semitic. You know, you say anything and it's anti-Semitic, and I think there needs to be people who clearly state that is not. That's, you know, you can criticize the American government. That doesn't mean I'm anti-America. Or you know, people can think that Trump is going to be a terrible president, and that all the people that voted for him, you know, what are they thinking? How have they lost their minds? But you also have to realize that not everyone did that, right? The people and the government are two separate things. And so when we can learn that that is true, I think we can also make some forward movement.
Thank you, Caitlin. Nick, Professor Nick Rushdie, your comments on
Yeah.
you
So hang on a minute.
shifted location now.
Yes, I had to move. So I agree completely with what Catherine mentioned earlier. There's one thing I noticed that, I mean, obviously students have a great role to play in changing the world, and that's always been the case. But I think what is been dismissed and ignored are the older generation, the ones that actually, the ones spending the money, the ones making decisions currently, right, as we speak. So this older generation is being ignored by the movement, in my opinion, my humble opinion. So that's why when we did the earlier fundraiser I mentioned, the people who attended the fundraiser, the 400 plus people, were 90% of them were 50 and above.
Wow.
Right? And these are the people who attend church in the US. These are the people, many of them vote for Trump, as we know. And they've been ignored by the movement completely, I think.
I see.
So in my opinion, I think the right approach is in trying to, because when we started here in Duluth, you know, they didn't know us at the Islamic Center in Duluth. The church didn't know us. It took us time to get to know them. So I think it's more of opening the hearts of the Americans, getting them to know who we are, what we represent. All those things open up the avenues for things to happen. So if we cannot open their hearts, you can protest and do whatever you want, it will not work. So it's always opening the hearts, I think, is the way to go. And how we do that, I think there's a lot we can learn from the Prophet, peace be upon him, on how to do that, because that's basically what he did. He opened the hearts of even his enemies, right? Eventually. So that would be my, probably, if you were asking for a way to do it, that would be the way to do it.
Okay. Now, don't lose hope on the oldies, the older generations. Even the students are important, but the older generations are also need to be reached out to, right? That's what you are saying.
Right.
Okay. Now, last one, 90%, maybe 95%, 99% of the audience are Malaysians. So to close off more than 1 hour, to close off our conversation tonight, you are, Nick, actually also a Malaysian and also American, but all of you have been to Malaysia, some for a long time, some only a few months. What advice do you want to give to our audience? 99% of audience now are Malaysians. What would be your advice to them in order to help the cause of justice, freedom, and equality in Palestine? The Malaysian audience. Go ahead. I will start with Nick first, and then all the way to others. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, frankly. I I think the Malaysians have done a lot already, in many ways. I think I'm going to leave it to the rest. I'm not an expert at this one.
Okay, Azhar.
Well, one, I think the BDS movement that you're heading, I think, is very important. And a lot of people do it on their own, but as we know, also the challenge is getting people to focus on some key companies to really put more pressure on. So I think some more communication to get people to know some of the key ones, because it's not just, like some of the companies are doing that. They're not doing the big damage like Caterpillar and, some of these real terrible ones that are doing serious stuff. So I like the focused effort. I think that's helpful. The BDS is good. Also, any other efforts, like I also do Masjid Dawa. And so we get, like, just on Monday, I had visitors from Alaska. So I got to talk to them. And it was a very good experience. Alaska's kind of up there out of the way. And so they got to unfortunately, they came to be open-minded, and they're one of the girls they took out of school and wanted her to have an experiential learning. So they'd never been to masjid, they never had any of this, and I spent time talking to them about Palestine also. So we get a good opportunity there in the masjid to meet international visitors, and get them to understand. So between that and I think BDS, those are good ways to keep the momentum going.
Thank you, Zahab. Caitlin?
Yeah, I think the BDS movement seems to have been and continues to be very successful in Malaysia. Another thing that I often think about is creating more transnational networks and organizations, right? So there's student-led movements in the United States. I'm sure there are student-led movements in Malaysia, through through UPM, maybe through some of the other universities. I think having strength in numbers, I think coordinating across countries is powerful as well. That's kind of the first thing that comes to mind for me. So I hope that there can be more coordination among activists in Malaysia, alongside the other activists in America and worldwide.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Safia?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say what Caitlin was about to mention, but I think something that has been really, really helpful for me, at least coming from America and coming here, is just seeing how much hope there is in Malaysia, and truly how devoted and dedicated people are. And something that at least has been really cool for me to see coming from America, where it's mostly a lot of students spearheading the effort, is here in Malaysia, it's been a lot of, I've gotten a chance to learn from a lot of older people, and a lot of people from, older generations like yourself, like other people who are very involved in BDS. And so it's been quite a very rewarding experience for me already in the few months that I've been here, to be able to hear from all of your wealth of experience and activism. And so I would urge people like yourself and just other people who have that sort of wealth of experience to share that with us in America, and with students in America and other people, to engage in those dialogue and those conversations, because truly, like, to be able to push forward, we have to learn from each other, right? And we have to be motivated by each other. And so, yeah, I would say that would be really, really helpful.
All right. Thank you very much, Safia, and thank you very much to all of you for spending your time more than an hour talking to me and to the audience. Hopefully, they all will learn something and also understand. I say to people, you talk about Palestine, you don't really understand the challenges that people in America are facing compared to what we are facing over here. When some people say that our protests are very small, right, compared to in America. Well, the reason is because in America it's more challenging, and that's why people over there have to work harder. And hopefully, inshallah, the movement in America is going to go stronger and stronger, because for me, that is the most important thing. Things will not change in Palestine unless things change in America. And inshallah, I see that things are moving. It may be slow, but when for me, it starts changing, it can be very fast. Just what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Syria recently, things can suddenly go very fast, and you may not even you may be surprised that things can, as I said just now, can simply, like what happened in Vietnam too. I think, right, it was very, very fast. The collapse of the hegemony of American hegemony in America was very, very fast indeed. Anyway, thank you again for spending time with us, and hopefully, Caitlin, keep warm. It's very cold over here, and hopefully we will have another opportunity to discuss again. Maybe post Trump, when he becomes president, I want to see what is going to happen to America when Trump becomes president, and then we have another discussion, hopefully, inshallah, in the future. Thank you again. Bye bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good night to everyone in Malaysia.